Hi everyone, Roman Jenkins here. Welcome back to the Let's Learn series. By my own admission, I've been away from this for a while, and most of that has to do with doing a couple Let's Plays in pretty rapid succession and then not really feeling like getting back into this immediately. I didn't play Modern Warfare 3 for a long time after I finished the Black Ops Let's Play, and then Ghost Recon Future Soldier came out, which is what you're seeing now, of course, and I've been playing a ton of that on the weekends when I get the time. Modern Warfare 3 just isn't really doing it for me right now. I'm probably going to go back to it eventually, but at this time, Ghost Recon is really fun, especially when you get a bunch of people together, or if you're just trying to document people being dumb. It's a fantastic way to record people being stupid, believe it or not. So, anyways, without further ado, let's get back into the Let's Learn series with Let's Learn Citizens United. Citizens United, or Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission, as the court case is known, was a case that was decided between 2009 and 2010 in the Supreme Court, and is the subject of a lot of controversy, especially over the idea of unlimited corporate spending in elections, and the fact that the Supreme Court seemed to ignore all precedents, and the way the case was decided, which goes into a lot of internal court politics. To this day, it's a very controversial decision. Things like super PACs haunt our election this year, and there is a very good chance that the PACs, as they have done already in almost every primary state during the Republican primary season, will spend more money than the candidates themselves. This is for a couple different reasons. But there's also another thing that we have to note, is that the super PACs aren't actually a result of Citizens United directly. There's a smaller case that was decided in the Washington, D.C.'s appeals court that actually allowed for this. But, and this is a big point, the basis in the bones of Citizens United, the Citizens United decision, actually made that other case possible in the first place. And so that's why we got where we are, and that's why a lot of people blame Citizens United for the way things are now. So what is Citizens United? Well, to understand this, we actually have to go back to 1947 in the Taft-Hartley Amendment, it was an act, actually, it was an amendment, and this basically barred the direct spending of unions and corporations in political races. Until 1947, this was a common thing. What this did was it actually created a group, or a sort of corporation, called a PAC, which stands for Political Action Committee, and this was something that could be funded by the union directly or by a corporation directly through the employees, not through corporate funds. The treasury funds of a corporation were not allowed to be spent in federal elections, was the end result of this. And there are a number of things that regulate PACs, how they can form, who can form them, what they can do with the money they raise, and how much money they can raise. But for the most part, corporate money was no longer, and union money to a lesser extent, was no longer good in these federal elections. So through the 1970s, there were a couple more amendments that really more or less outlined this break between corporate and private funds in elections a little bit more clearly. And then finally in 2002, the McCain-Feingold Act, or amendment, that completely barred any sort of advertising for a candidate or against a candidate, attack ads basically, within 30 days of a primary for a federal seat and 60 days of the actual election. And in 2008, this case was brought up because a group called Citizens United, which had previously tried to test this with a different case at the Federal Elections Commission in 2004, decided to film and promote a movie called Hillary the Movie that was basically a 30-second attack ad that was brought out into longer form. Now, the Federal Elections Commission obviously came down on them on this one because it was a Citizens United is classified as a social welfare organization similar to American Crossroads GPS. It's a political action group. And so they brought charges up against this corporation because they had spent their corporate money to make an ad and then to air the ad, and it was about a candidate. And this is, of course, simplifying a lot of the governmentese that is involved with this. Citizens United appealed, and the appeal ended up in the Supreme Court. It was put on the docket in 2008 and was heard in 2009, almost a year later, March of 2009. Now, the initial layout of this was that there was going to be a 5-4 decision with the conservatives and Justice Anthony Kennedy siding with Citizens United, saying that the corporation in question here was totally within its limits to make this ad and put advertisements out for it because it was a commercial product based on the ruling the FEC had in the previous case that Citizens United brought before them, which was about Michael Moore's documentary Fahrenheit 9/11, where Michael Moore had not used George W. Bush at all in the ads within 60 days of the election, yet it still managed to be an anti-Bush piece because Citizens United had brought forward facts instead of hearsay and conjecture. The Supreme Court felt that they had a point in actually putting this movie out. Now, what happened was Chief Justice John Roberts, was going to write the majority opinion, and he was going to decide it based on the narrow definition and the narrow kind of rule of law he was allowed. What happened instead was that Justice Anthony Kennedy, the swing vote who came down in favor of Citizens United in this case, wrote a much more expansive concurrence. And when this started to circulate among the majority, including Samuel Alito, Antonin Scalia, Clarence Thomas, they all asked that this be the actual ruling. So what happened from here was pretty simple. Roberts basically dropped his version of the ruling and put it in favor of Kennedy's, and then called for another hearing. And this one was just it was basically a move by the Supreme Court to allow for their wider decision. The questions put forward by the court were pretty much preordained, knowing the answers, so they could rule on these questions as well. And what came out of this was a ruling that said that corporate money is being restricted in these federal elections by the McCain-Feingold Act, and therefore is restricting free speech because money equals speech to the Supreme Court. The idea is that a corporation of any nature is basically trying to buy time to get their point across. So while they can't donate directly to a politician, they should be able to air ads on people and issues they think are important. And they should be able to do this without limit and without real consequence. The only consequence they have is that they have to name themselves and show where their donors are. So from this, you started to see a real possibility of major money going into federal elections. And once again, this is what we're seeing this year with one corporation or another could just put out millions upon millions of dollars in a state and flood the state with pro or anti-candidate ads. And this is what a lot of the liberals on the bench, as well as outside of the court, saw and feared. A lot of conservatives, on the other hand, claim that this would allow places like businesses downtown to actually put together political ads so they would be able to influence their friends and neighbors through those. This seems like a really poor use of advertising dollars, but I'm not a small business owner, so I can't really tell you if that's the case or not. However, what it has done in effect is open up the federal election to things that have happened before in smaller elections. There was a not a federal judgeship, but rather a state judgeship that was open, and what happened was the guy who ran for and won it was then told by a corporation, because it was a statewide election, that they would start running ads against him if he didn't start ruling the way they wanted him to. And this could now be applied to your local congressman. You could have somebody from any company in the country, let's say you're my congressman, you're Joe Courtney, and you want to have something done. You want to change every jet fighter in the U.S. Air Force to biodiesel. And Pratt & Whitney, who is in your district, does not like that because they don't have any biodiesel jets. Let's say that's the case. They're actually working on those. But say Pratt & Whitney goes to Joe Courtney and tells him in the next election we are going to be putting a huge buyout on media throughout the entire half of the state you cover, and it's going to do nothing but say how bad you are for jobs in the state and how much better your opponent would be on this issue. And we're not going to put money towards your opponent, but we're going to put a lot of ads out, and we don't actually have to disclose who we are until a quarter later. So while there is a law out there that says that these people have to disclose who they are, it actually in effect does not happen. But this is the sort of thing that happens now. Instead of being limited to PACs or the political action committees, as we've mentioned before, corporations can take directly from their treasury and put it into election year ads. And what a lot of these have become are instead issue ads. And you used to see these all the time. They would usually run when there weren't an election going on because of the basically the downtime. But you'd see something like Joe Courtney wants to kill 1 million jobs in Connecticut. Call up Joe Courtney and tell him not to kill these jobs. And not only can you run those, the day before the election or the day of the election, you can run those with corporate money directly, which is a terrifying little proposition for a lot of people. Now, what we've seen emerge from this is the Super PAC. And as I've said, the Super PAC was not a direct creation of the Citizens United thing. But let's go into that a bit because we do have 5 minutes left. A Super PAC is basically an organization made up of whomever, and they just put money into this organization and they buy ads. There's no other way to put it. There's no limit on the donation. There's no restrictions on who can put the money in there. So this is the theory Obama had right after the decision that foreign money could go straight into this. So you could have somebody from Israel, let's say, the Israeli lobby is very strong in Washington, D.C., put money directly into the Super PAC without ever thinking, is this person trying to influence an election in our country with interest to him, but he's not a U.S. citizen, he doesn't live in the country, this doesn't affect him directly. There's no mechanism to stop this anymore. So Super PACs have become a major thing. Candidates like Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum had almost no money for ad buys, but luckily Super PACs were there to do the ad buys for them. And candidates have plausible deniability on these because by law, candidates are not allowed to organize with these Super PACs. It's one of the few restrictions they have on them. And these Super PACs have actually, there's no one policing this. The Federal Elections Commission is almost deadlocked and shackled on this. They're not allowed to do anything. So a candidate can support a Super PAC. They can say that this is the PAC they like or anything like that as a private citizen. That's their right. However, they can't donate directly to it and they can't organize with it. So what you get is something like what happened this weekend with Mitt Romney's Super PAC, Restoring Our Future, and you had people like Rick Santorum and Marco Rubio, who were Rick Santorum, former senator from Pennsylvania. Marco Rubio is the current senator from Florida, both Republicans, showing up at an event for the Super PAC, which is actually funded by about 16 people. That's not corporations, that's very rich people who are basically buying a lot of ad time for a candidate. And some of those people are people Romney's known his entire life. Like I said, there's no real firewall on this.
Shit. What the hell?
So there is one other thing we have to talk about, and those are the social welfare groups, like Citizens United. This is not actually what they are. They don't provide any sort of service. They are issue advertisers. So the reason Citizens United caught so much fire is because Citizens United, by their status as a 501c4, which is a tax-exempt issue organization, they are not allowed to run candidate-specific ads. they can run an ad that similar to the issue ad we talked about with Joe Courtney, saying that he wants to kill 1 million Connecticut jobs. Well, in this case, they can run an issue ad any time now, saying that Joe Courtney killed and ate a baby. Tell Joe Courtney not to kill and eat babies. Yes, they may be sued for it, but it's completely kosher and legal. Of course, if you got that on the air, it'd be impressive. What you usually get is something like Joe Courtney voted for this bill, and now Joe Courtney is going to vote for this bill, which is also terrible. Call Joe Courtney's office and tell him not to vote for this new bill and save this many Connecticut jobs. And you get that on both sides of the aisle. It's a time-tested tactic. But now these companies like Citizens United and Crossroads GPS, let's say, they have all become sort of even more powerful because they can air these ads day of, and they can get unlimited funding without disclosing their donors, which is the main appeal of the 501c. They never have of C4. They never have to disclose their donors. Now you'll notice that a lot of these organizations are actually conservatively based, and this is because, well, I can't explain it. A lot of people say that with the way this thing works is that the conservatives will have a much better advantage because they're going to be basically running these big ad buys, and they get more money because they're attacking the president, whereas the president is trying to get money to get reelected on his super PAC, and it's just not as attractive to him because no one knows what they're by donating to a conservative super PAC, you get a chance to defeat a president. By donating to Obama's super PAC, you get Obama still. There's just not enough sexiness to it. So I hope everyone learned a bit and aren't put off by politics this year. See you soon.
Up to melee somebody right there at the end.
The battle is ours. We have crushed the enemy.
Yeah, that P90 had like no recoil. That was